Comenzamos con la siguiente ponencia, en la cual contaremos con la charla de Beatrice Polato, y por tanto me paso al inglés. Beatrice Polato is a PhD candidate at University of Barcelona, Spain, with a research on contemporary art in Kenya, where she is temporarily living. She worked as a teacher of philosophy and history in Italian secondary school, and after graduation, she spent 3 months at the Warburg Institute in London for research about collecting in 2002. She taught art history in the Renaissance period and contemporary history at CIEE Italy, the Council on International Educational Exchange, a university exchange program between 2006 and 2010. In 2016, she gave a lecture at the Italian Studies Oxford about a case study in which art was adopted as a participatory methodology. So, Beatrice, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to present my paper to this seminar. Thanks, Julia, for the presentation. And let me share the screen. Okay. Can you see it? Okay. So I would like to share with you some of the subjects I will be investigating in my PhD. I would start providing some information about the Kenyan context, illustrating in broad strokes the contemporary art scene, almost entirely concentrated in Nairobi, before presenting some reflections more connected with the subject of this conference, the participatory approach to artistic practices. My research is focused on Kenya, an East African country which has witnessed in the last decades an impressive economic development as well as an artistic one. Art as well has contributed to this African Renaissance, a term coined by Thabo Mbeki in 1998. The exponential growth of the number of artists, galleries, curators, and other professions linked to the art system, even international, is not matched by any other corresponding development of a structured narrative, academic and non-academic, on artistic expression being produced. Any discussion about contemporary Kenyan art is connected to a research of personal and collective identity. It is mediated, like everywhere else, by the globalization within the philosophical and anthropological postmodern debate. How art lives and reproduces itself, how it contributes to generating a new self-image that is beyond perception from abroad, or that is an active dialogue with this set of perceptions. The Western world has more or less consciously proposed a narrative based on the archaic and primitive nature already pursued by the historical avant-garde. This approach is currently differentiated in curatorial and collectors' variants, which sometimes support and validate the idea of the denial of coevalness for the artists and their artworks. Because of a shared interest in the pleasure of art, in meeting and in dialogue, and perhaps in deconstructing some stereotypes, the idea emerged of creating a collective of artists. With a group of artists, Wambui Kamiru, Collymore, Onis Martin, Longinos Nagila, and David Thuku, all living and working in Kenya, we have created a collective called Uncollective to discuss art. The name of the collective, Uncollective, suggests some features that represent the spirit of the group. The individual as part of a group, not as a founding act, but as a fluid choice with reference to a specific project, to a moment of personal artistic research. The categories visual artists, storytellers, researchers, and artists in the broad sense are primarily reflecting an approach to life. In this perspective, the cultural experience goes far beyond the boundaries of an art exhibition or a cultural event, which, as mentioned, have animated Nairobi cultural life in the last decade, allowing a wider, more existential and educational growth, a final work to be offered to the public as a product of a long-term and shared path. The relationship among us and the idea of sharing our thoughts, we could say in a participatory manner, contributes to building a more in-depth analysis in which the art object is transformed into an object for discussion, debate, and connection, where the process in itself becomes important and the discovery of the other is the main purpose. Within the collective uncollective, we have been discussing about different macro themes which emerge spontaneously during our meetings: identity, time and space, displacement, and environmental concerns, embodied in the concept of wall, not only physical as the one built around countries, but also as the one perceived, the starting point of an investigation that interrogates the artist's practice in our contemporary globalized era. In our meetings, normally held every other month, we have tried to imagine how our ideas could be shared with an interactive audience through performances, installations, interactive exhibitions, and meetings. These artistic endeavors, for the time being an ongoing process, creating a narrative about the artist's work and the artist's role within the society. The purpose is to fill the lack of critical mass around art and through it contribute to develop a wider social awareness. This shared reflection to partaken with a wider audience intend to understand to which public the art in Kenya is speaking to, with whom the artists are relating to. What is their relational space? In Nairobi, the art audience consists mainly of expatriates or a local elite, educated and curious, or even the artists themselves, which in the community are both actors and spectators. Uncollective is an experiment, a different methodology of designing, sharing the idea that artistic practice attempts to establish connections and opening passages currently blocked by the society. In this group meeting, walls were torn down, but others were built in the other. It was a work about the relationship between art and the other, on an intellectual, non-activist, non-partisan, and non-tribal basis. A pleasure and displeasure was potential, and impact can be appreciated on other projects in which the artist and myself can participate individually. This experience is characterized by the type of participatory approach described by Roger Sansi in his book Art, Anthropology and the Gift, when he says in the late 90s the themes of the gift and the participation became a central object of discussion in contemporary art practice and theory, especially through Bourdieu's relational aesthetics. Many have questioned relational aesthetics, but perhaps the fiercest criticism comes from Bishop, who is not against participatory art. On the contrary, Bishop argues that the end of art is not to generate, a friendship culture, but to question, antagonize, and promote dissent. In light of the numerous suggestions coming from the different approaches of participatory art, Bourriaud, Bishop, just to mention a few, I asked myself how to approach the concept of participatory art in the Kenyan context. What does it mean? Its meaning, what are the particular features of this concept in Kenya? The concept of participatory art, relational art, and social art are part of a wide array of definitions used in the Western world to describe cultural or methodological trends. One of the elements emerged in the meeting with the artist is the playful but equally heartfelt rejection of any labels, especially when those are the result of Western intellectualizations. The uncollective itself denies its own definition. Applying the concept of participation, talking about collectives or participatory art, requires, in the Kenyan context, some premises which could highlight some commonalities as well as some novelties vis-à-vis what has been debated in the Western world. The artists in Kenya are, first of all, individuals who have managed to establish themselves as artists or are trying to establish themselves in a relatively new art system. They do so with a lot of emphasis on the technical process, the aesthetical forms, and discourse that inspired them. Their attitude is, I'm doing a job. The artists are looking for a way to affirm themselves in a sector characterized by the presence of galleries, as well as curators and local and international collectors who are looking for new artworks to be promoted in the market and for new energies. The day-to-day work of the artist is therefore private and personal, but they also have the ability to combine this activity as individuals with very spontaneous instances of sharing with other actors in the art world. There is a capacity for the community to create and recreate bonds every time is needed as a culturally given and accepted discourse, even in a metropolis megacity like Nairobi. It would be incorrect to state that in Kenya, one builds community relationships with everyone. There are communal identities, friendships, dynamics characterized by choices, chance, congeniality, opportunism. As everywhere, relationships are never neutral. This feature is even more noticeable by looking at the different incubators, set of art studios or shared art studios, which makes up the art scene in Nairobi. In Nairobi, there are a number of incubators, just to name a few: Kuona, Kobo, Brush2, places where artists share a common space. First of all, a physical one, but in some cases also a space of common research. As Bourriaud argues that along with the development of the relational practices, we witness a growing urbanization of art. Art takes to the street, occupies urban spaces, take over daily routine, bringing new meanings to the daily reality. In Kenya, there are not contemporary art museums or foundations which invest in art like in other African countries. Therefore, these spaces, private or supported by trusts, are the most common loci for arts. These spaces have also an impact on the environment in which they are included. The current artistic spaces are developing in relational terms, becoming spaces of holistic planning. The term museum is replaced by art factory, or artistic laboratory. Therefore, some artists are often living two creative adventures, one more linked to the market and another one connected to, so to speak, their personal and collective growth. The participatory dimension, which in the Western world was conceived in opposition to disintegrated, incohesive societies, which needed also, through art, to re-establish intercommunal relationships, here assumes a different meaning. What in the title of the conference, Restaurando il vinculo dello collettivo, here can be translated in Manteniendo il vinculo dello collettivo. Whichever definition you want to adopt of participatory art, in Kenya it seems to be part of a language which is still present in the society. The city periphery dualism might have loosened family ties, but these ideas are still alive and could be easily recreated everywhere. These incubators are showing in their own way the dynamics of relational arts. Even if it is not always possible to have an external audience for logistics and economic reasons, the artist internal community played the role of co-acting audience, creating a continuous interchange of ideas and critique. Now here you can see a clip from an interview with a group of artists in Brush 2 Collective, one of the collective I have mentioned before. Let me start with the video.
Yeah, so I think I can respond from my own point of view. I usually believe in individual strengths, because I believe when you're strong as an individual, another individual, and then you come together, you pull your own resources together and create a bigger entity that is. And as Mike was saying, everyone has their own way of working, have their own personal goals, and of course has their own personal working space. But at the end of the day, they are all connected together, because at the end of the day, when you have your own goals to focus on, and somebody else has their own goals to focus on, it's hard to get in somebody else's ways. But at the end of the day, also you have that bigger sphere that I'm sharing this space with someone, I'm sharing a certain concept with some other people. So when you have a certain thought and then it's not working towards your own direction, but it has crossed you, so I think this idea can work well with what the other person is working on, and then you share. And then that's where also the working ethics comes in. So this person and this person behaves like this. So when you interact, of course, you understand, and then you stop doubting yourself, because when you start, the other person corrects you maybe, and when you look around, you think you're the only insane person, and then you look around, you find a lot of insane people, so you feel okay. So I don't know whether that,
Okay. Unfortunately, our meetings with Uncollective, as well as other immaterial initiatives, cannot be central to the lives of artists because of the economic pressure is strong and direct choices. Selling art allows you to survive. Experiencing art, talking about and projecting moments to share with the public, it is an activity that is important but still very difficult to pursue. The ontological opposition between aesthetics and economics is in Kenya, but not only here, more theoretical than practical. The impossibility of keeping alive participatory processes without a substantial financial support is common to past experiences in Europe as well, similar to the example of Freeform, a collective of what in Britain came to be known as community arts. At that time, community arts were the avant-garde of art practice in Britain, and freeform received support from public institutions like the Art Council for more than a decade. Their work shifted with time from performances and festivals to environmental projects, etc. After the 80s, with the neoliberal policies of Margaret Thatcher conservative governments, community arts in the UK became increasingly marginalized from public funding, something separate from artistic production between education and social services. Obviously, a super conceptual art emphasizing the process of thinking in an almost exclusive manner is not altogether new in the Kenyan art scene. Even if there are not many artists focusing on it full time, we could certainly mention, among others, Sioya Kiambi. She works alone, but also collectively. The group of people that she invites or she interacts with usually is of a flat hierarchy. The meetings features a mix of self-led activities and arranged activities in support of the group's background, interests, or methodologies. One of the most recent installations and performance pieces entitled Fracture followed the life of a woman named Rose, whose life was in limbo, stuck in between two worlds where she did not belong. Sioya used a multi-layered performance to dissect themes of identity and the female experience, but also invited the audience to interpret the various meanings found within the piece. Furthermore, another factor that might have created in the Kenyan context and more generally in the global South familiarity with the participatory process may be related with the activities that many NGOs are carrying out using art methodologies to achieve specific objectives in the communities where they work. In this case, very seldom artists are promoting projects with artistic purposes. It is rather the methodology, the figurative art or photography, as well as theater, which is borrowed by humanitarian workers as a communication tool prop. The final aesthetic project is completely secondary or even absent. The main outcome is the response of the communities to the input of the methodology itself, photo voice, painting, or drawing as a group. The operator, psychologist, or education expert does not intend to create an artistic product. The objective is the impact on communities through creative processes often distant from the curricula of African school systems. These experiences have certainly contributed to the familiarity with participatory art processes, but at the same time, as it happened in the Western world, the lack of attention for the aesthetic dimension distracted the art critic from these practices and contributed to create a hiatus between the artistic practice and participatory artistic practice. We could conclude by saying that the participatory experiences are consistent with Kenyan's social structures. Therefore, they are lived rather than intellectually analyzed in their definition. The artists are intending to contribute to the construction of an African history and the collective awareness as part of a wider struggle for freedom on which to build the future. Most of the artists I met and who produce contemporary art have developed the necessary antibodies to what I would call the origin syndrome. They are active in the international and contemporary debate, aware that this means being hybrids, having multiple personality, or carries of a plurality of meanings. Any reduction to univocal meanings would then make fall into a lie, as can be seen from the writings on post-colonialism Bembe. And like Sioya Kiambi looks at the existing gap in the East African art scene and views it as a positive thing, as it allows alternative developments to emerge. She urges everybody, artist or not, to take part in either creating, receiving, or believing. And so the narrative is open as well as the experimentation. Okay, it's concluded.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had a very small technical problem. Now it's solved.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And are there any questions? I think it's very interesting to put together this very different concepts and contexts, and also kind of put away a little bit of the Eurocentrism of most such events. So
I think it's an example of art and precarity, as Miguel mentioned before.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Completely. Yes, thank you very much. Are there any questions? ¿Hay alguna pregunta para Beatrice?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to conduct the research between Kenya and Barcelona?
I'm based in Nairobi, actually. And so, because I was living here before to start the PhD research, so yeah, I consider it a privilege to be here and to interact a lot with the art scene here. Unfortunately, it's not easy for me. I'm Italian, so when I'm in Europe, I'm based in Italy. I came last year to the other seminar that you organized in person. But yes, this year, because of COVID, also traveling and moving abroad is quite difficult. So fortunately, I'm here and I can a bit less than before, but still I'm interacting a lot with, in particular, a small group of artists that I mentioned in the paper and collective, but also others, because obviously the PhD research is not focused on participatory practices, but it's more general. So I'm interviewing almost all the art scene here.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It was really, really interesting to take a peek into this scene. And
Absolutely.
Because we are a bit over time, maybe we can go on, and because we also have a final discussion panel, so we can continue with all the questions raised and put together the different interventions and dialogue.